Hey, it's Chris with Acting Creative, and this is a hand-woven experience. And in this episode, I'm going to walk you through how to calculate the number of heddles per shafts for your project. That's a big old title, isn't it? And I'll warn you right out of the gates, there is math involved in this episode. Yes, the dreaded math. So do what you need to, a little deep breathing, a little meditation, whatever it takes, you can do this. Hang with me through this important episode. Okay, so let's start from the very top and give you a little orientation. I am sitting at the front of my loom. Here is my beater bar here. Here are my 4 shafts. And when I lift a shaft, you can see these are my heddles. And mine are metal. They can be a whole variety of different materials and different styles. But heddles are really important to a loom and to any weaving project because depending on how you sequence your warp yarns to go into your shafts, that helps dictate what your pattern looks like. It's all tied together. So heddles are very important. And there are some specific instances when you need to really know what number of heddles you need before you start your project. Because what you learn quickly is that the easiest and best time to add heddles to your shafts is when your loom is empty. You can do it while you're dressing your loom, but it is just a lot tougher. So as you're planning your project, there are a couple scenarios when it is just smart to make sure that you have the right counts on the right shafts for your pattern. So the first scenario is when you're going to use the entire width of the loom. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't typically use the entire width of my 36-inch loom. If you do, you can scratch off the scenario. It's no problem. You're all set. But if that's rare for you to use every inch, that should be a little red flag that goes up and says, maybe I need to check my heddles, how many I have on each shaft. The second scenario is when you're using a yarn that is finer or thinner than you normally do. Let's say you typically space it at 12 ends per inch, and this yarn is 24 to 30 ends per inch. That's a lot more heddles you're gonna need in 1 inch. So that should also be another time when a little voice in your head says, it might be a good idea to count some heddles. So let's pick a mysterious project, a made-up project, and let's walk through some ways that you can calculate how many heddles you need per shaft for your project. So the first method is per inch. So we are going to do an imaginary table runner that is 10 inches wide in the loom, right? Now, one of the numbers you always have to have when you're doing any planning for a project is EPI, which stands for ends per inch. And that tells us how closely or how far apart we want to space our warp yarn. So you have to know your ends per inch in order to figure out how many heddles you're going to need. And for our imaginary project, we are going to space it at 8 ends per inch, 10 inches wide, 8 ends per inch. Okay, that's a good base. That's a good place to start. So let's say that we are going to do kind of a simple threading. This is a weaving draft here. This is your threading. This is your visual set of instructions for the sequence that the warp yarns go into the shafts. And in this case, it's a straight draw, which is lovely. 1 yarn per shaft, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, over and over and over again. Lovely, right? So looking at this shows just 1 repeat here. But imagine we're gonna do this over and over and over again. And our project, we know, is 8 ends per inch. And 1 repeat is 4 yarns. So if we double that again and we do our counts, we know that we need 2 heddles on shaft 1, 2 on shaft 2, 2 on shaft 3, and 2 on 4 to create 1 inch of our project, right? Nice math. Then, because our project is 10 inches wide, we're gonna multiply that out, and voila, we know exactly how many heddles we need on which shaft for our project. Okay, so that's the first method you can use that you calculate it per inch of your project. Now, let's say that you're working with a threading that's a little more complicated than that one. Let me find my example here. Here we go. Okay, so look at this. Isn't that pretty? I love these. Isn't that fun? A little M&W action. So let's say this is our threading. Now, I've already counted this, so I know there are 22 ends in 1 repeat. By the way, this approach of this technique is all about doing it per repeat instead of per inch, what we did just a moment ago. So let's say that this is the threading we're going to work with, and I've counted, I know that there's 22 yarns in 1 repeat. Now, our project is 10 inches wide and we have 8 ends per inch, which is a total of 80 yarns in the entire project, right? And 1 repeat here is 22 yarns. So we need roughly 4 repeats. Now, I know it's not exact, but don't worry about that because 4 repeats, doing the math, I know you're with me, is 88 yarns and we only have 80. No problem. Don't worry about that. Because I'd rather you have a few extra than to have less than that. But the idea then is that once you know how many times you're going to go through the sequence, figure up one sequence and multiply it out. Here we go. So for this threading on shaft 1, which is the bottom row, we need 1, 2, 3, 4. We need 4 heddles on shaft 1 for 1 repeat. For shaft 2, here we go. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We need 7 on shaft number 2. Okay? Shaft number 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, it's the same. Shaft number 3, we need 7 heddles there as well. And then shaft number 4, that looks like 4 to me. So we know how many heddles we need per 1 repeat. And we're going to round up and say we have 4 repeats. Just do the math. There we go. You know exactly then how many heddles you're going to need per shaft for your project. Now, you'll notice I was not too crazy concerned that it wasn't exactly the same. You can work that out in your design, but I would much rather that you tacked on a few extra heddles than ever be short. So as you are figuring up whichever method, whether it's per inch or per repeat, just to kind of keep that in mind. It's not a bad thing to have a couple extra heddles floating around there if at all possible. So that gives you 2 different methods to figure up how many heddles you need per shaft for your project. I know that was a lot. I know that was a lot of math and very technical, but there are going to be times when it's going to come in really handy as you're looking at this new project and you're thinking, I don't know if I have enough heddles. So keep that in your back pocket as a couple techniques for you before you dive into your next lovely project. All right, friends, I hope that helped. Have a wonderful week and happy weaving.